Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. We've got Dr. Laura Gallaher back on the show, and we're going to talk about how you can be the best you. And, it's a little more, it's not emotional, but it is challenging to you. It's a journey to become the best you. And I want to encourage you to really think about what's in this dialogue, because it'll change your life. And if it changes your life positively, it'll change everyone's life around you. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, share it with friends, tell people about it, like it. We really appreciate you participating and considering what we have to say. And we got some great guests, and Laura's back. Let's dive in. Laura, it is great to have you back on the show. I don't do that a lot, but I think where we left off, you started to talk about the NASA Columbia situation and what could be learned there. Mm-hmm. And that's got to be a bigger topic. So I said, why don't you come back and we'll see where that leads, because not only are you going to cover that, but then who knows? So where do you want to start?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you for having me back, David. I'm excited to be here again. And yeah, I can, remind your listeners about Columbia just briefly, because I think I did get into it in the last episode. And then I can share some of my own personal learnings that ended up being more related to the learnings from Columbia than was easy to admit. So Columbia, just as a reminder, there was that piece of foam that hit the wing during the launch. And so the primary challenge or issue was it wasn't supposed to be an in-flight issue. And these engineers were really afraid, but they needed the data to prove it. And so they were asking for imagery, but they weren't using official channels. And so when the mission management team eventually kind of roundabout heard that there was this request, they said, is there a requirement for this? And they all looked at each other and said no. And so it just didn't happen. And so these engineers were still very afraid, still very concerned, but ultimately self-deception kicked in and they felt constrained by the system of the organization. There wasn't enough psychological safety for people to say, hey, I just have a gut feeling that this is different and this is going to be bad. And so NASA brought me in to work with the leaders to help them understand psychological safety and work to create that in the culture. Because you want to have the kind of environment where even if you don't have perfect data to back up what you're saying, if you've got 15 years of experience and your gut says something's different about this foam strike, I feel it, that you can say that and not be worried about being judged or being belittled or being demeaned or have it ruin your whole career.
And now remind the audience, how many years ago was this?
This was in 2003. So this was February 1st, 2003. So it's been, 22 years. Yeah. So I had been working for NASA, as a psychologist, working with the leaders on psychological safety. And I moved up pretty quickly into a leadership role. And I had done multiple 360-degree feedback assessments. Have you ever done one of those, David?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They have their place and I really thought they were great. I mean, I was part of an initiative at Kennedy Space Center to work to bring them to individual contributors. I have a lot of opinions about them now, but coming back to my story, so I'd been in a leadership role and I had done one of these 360 feedback reports and I was at a leadership training and I'd gotten my report before lunch. I'm sitting in the cafeteria and I'm going through this 30-page report. And I remember turning to one of the pages and the respondents were asked to indicate which of these negative influence tactics does Laura use. And I'd gotten pretty good feedback up to that point. But on this page, I saw that there were a couple people on my team. So not even like peers or customers, leaders, people on my team who said that they felt like I would sometimes bully them intellectually. Oh.
Now, wait a minute, with a 360, isn't usually that confidential?
It
so
was.
You just know they were on you knew they were on your team, but you didn't know exactly who they were in theory.
Yes. So
but because you knew they were on your team, you could guess.
The way it was set up is that people were responding in groups. So I could see this is what my internal customers would say in aggregate. This is what my peers would say in aggregate. This is what my direct reports would say in aggregate, things like that. And David, it's not their words, intellectual bullying. It was one of the negative influence tactics, like in a list. But to see anybody say that they felt like they had experienced that from me, I like really felt like I'd been punched in the gut. It was horrifying. And I remember even later that afternoon, I was working with my assigned coach and I was telling her about this, with horror in my voice and my face. And she said, "Oh, I saw your face in the cafeteria. It was hilarious." And she was laughing at my pain. I don't know. I didn't find it funny, but I mean, I must have had a huge reaction to it, even outwardly, because the embarrassment that I felt at here I am, PhD in psychology. I have been brought in to work with leaders on creating psychological safety. And here I am struggling to create that for at least a couple people on my own team.
Yeah.
It was a very, very humbling experience.
So what do you do with that? I mean, and how many people were on the team overall?
My team was fairly small. I had like 5 people on the team.
Yeah. So you had 40% of your team raising the yellow flag or a red flag.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that? Because first of all, isn't it instinctive? You try to figure out who said it.
Oh, yeah. Of course, there's always that element of like, give me an example and tell me exactly what. And fortunately, I knew enough in my role and in my expertise. I knew enough to not do that. So yes, I'm sure that I was wondering, and I'm sure I had my hypotheses about who it was. And even if I was right in thinking who it was, I don't know that it changed my feeling and the emotions that I had around it. So for me, it was a lot to kind of get over in the moment. And I'm happy that I was doing this leadership training at the time. So I was away from the team and I was immersed with other leaders who were going through a similar program. And I was able to work with my assigned coach and work to get some clarity, because it was a huge example of where I was self-deceived. Because I can promise you, David, I never woke up and said, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go bully some people intellectually, right? Like, I never, ever, ever had that intention. That's never how I would want people to feel. And yet they were feeling it. And so there's some way that I was disconnected from them and disconnected from myself that was leading to that outcome.
Okay. So what'd you do?
So what did I do?
Yeah.
Well, so I was really focused on introspection at that point. And what I came to find out, so I had a lot of conversations with the team when I came back. Like I talked with them individually. I told them what stood out to me about the findings that I got. And I said, here are a couple of the things that I think that I would like to do in order to shift and create more of the environment that I want. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So I was really trying to approach them not through a lens of like, was this you? What should I do? I really wanted to demonstrate, hey, I'm putting a lot of thought and effort and intention into this. And here are some of the behaviors that I think that I can tweak. So those are some of the tactical steps. But most of it for me, David, was really introspecting. So I knew enough about defense mechanisms to know that if you think you don't have defenses, then your defenses have you. So I was like, okay, how might my defensiveness be showing up in a way that people might feel bullied intellectually? And I was pretty new in that leadership role. And I was still in my 20s at that point in time. And I was able to see in my own behavior that if I didn't feel like I was effectively persuading my team, or I felt like I was getting resistance or even non-engagement, that subconsciously these fears around my own incompetence would start to bubble up. And the way these defense mechanisms work is I don't want to feel incompetent. And so my psychological immune system suppresses the actual fear of my incompetence. It distorts how I'm viewing the world. And all of a sudden, I think I now have to be an avid advocate for whatever my opinion already was. And now I'm pulling all the cards and putting them on the table, like about my PhD and this research article, this and research article, that. And that I can look at now and go like, okay, yeah, I could see how that could feel like intellectual bullying, right? Like if I'm trying to lean on my academic background or education as a means to try to get somebody to see my way and pair that with maybe I'm not listening very well, maybe I'm not holding enough space as a leader for them to share their perspective. Ugh.
I'm curious,
Yeah.
why do you view that as suppressing the fear? It seems like the fear is actually a very active component fueling the defensive mechanisms.
There's an element of the fear that we don't usually let ourselves know. So I might have an awareness of the fear of like, they're not getting this, or, why am I not being persuasive enough? But that's not a painful enough fear to sort of break me apart or dismantle me. The much deeper fear is connected to something that's usually much bigger. Like, am I fundamentally incompetent? Like, as a human? It's putting an artificial weight on any given moment, on any given idea. It's over-identifying with my own work, my project, my initiative, thinking that, if this thing doesn't work exactly how it's supposed to, I'm just broken, right? It's this really misguided fear that's deeply hidden in the subconscious about myself.
Well, I'm in agreement with that, but what I'm not following is, wouldn't that deep fear be driving the defense behavior versus being suppressed? Because if I heard you correctly, maybe I heard you wrong. You said that the fear then becomes suppressed and then you have these behaviors. But actually, to me, it seems like the fear is very active and it's fueling those defensive behaviors where you're bringing up your papers or you're bringing up your prestige or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the fear is definitely what's driving the defensive behaviors.
Okay.
But the piece that's suppressed, and this, I'm curious if this is your experience, David, because when I see somebody else having what's fairly obviously a defensive reaction, especially if they haven't done any of the self-awareness work or any of the self-acceptance work, and I ask them, like, hey, what's going on, or what was that about? They don't come to me with that level of clarity. They don't say, well, deep down, I think I just over-identify with this role and I'm really deeply... They say things like, well, they're resisting and I just don't have time. I don't have time to sit around and wait for them to get on board. We just have to move forward on this thing. They have convinced themselves that they're only behaving the way that they are because other people are somehow inadequate. They're incompetent. And that's that distortion. So I don't let myself know that I have this really deep fear that's driving all the defenses. And so what I'm suppressing is that deeper story in my head, and I'm replacing it with this distorted idea that helps me justify my ineffective behavior.
My experience in recent years has been what I think we probably touched on previously: two major emotions, love and fear, drive everything.
Yes.
And the fear piece really that I hear you describing, that is often with people who really who have a low EQ, really low understanding of themselves, is to move into victimhood. And that is defensive. And that is the blames every other which way, but it's not with me. There are some other fears. So, of course, which I'm sure you would agree, which probably your engineers had back at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't figure this out, it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a healthy fear, or very much a healthy fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so there can be healthy fears. How you then respond to those, I mean, you know more about this than me. I'm sure can be unhealthy ways that you can respond to it, like you can go attack people or argue with them or just try to push your way,
right,
versus engage in some dialogue. Or it can be healthy. The fear itself maybe is healthy, but when you're playing the blame game, which happens a lot, particularly in America today.
I know.
America, it's all about me, baby. And it's not my fault, so I don't have to take the blame. And it's not my responsibility, so I don't have to fix it. Because everything I do is about me, is too much perpetuated by our media and our elites. The people who are controlling a lot of the messaging that we get, whether it's advertising or news or whatever it might be. Yeah. It's a constant, you're not good enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you had these conversations with members of your team, did you bring up specifically the concern that was raised? Or did you respond to it more indirectly Because I think this is an important thing with 360s. I mean, am I wrong, by the way, that if you have a healthy team culture, there's other ways to have 360, because you said you had other feelings about 360s.
I do. I have a lot of
If
opinions.
you have a healthy team culture,
Yeah.
you should be getting the feedback and providing safe environments to get the feedback.
100%.
I tell people all the time, they'll say, do you prefer Dave or David? And I say, I don't care. You can call me Dave, David, Russ, Russell, Coach. I only care about your tone of voice.
Oh,
And,
okay, yeah.
and I took your assessment, and I'm pushing but pressured.
Mhm.
I'm 100% on the D in some of the tests I've taken in the DISC. So I'm very much type A driven. But my big bias is I just want to do it the right way. So if you come up to me and say, hey, Dave, I'm sorry, I know you just spent 3 months building this, but this isn't going to work. May I please explain why? I'm going to be like, tell me. I want to know.
Yeah.
But if you walk up and talk to me in a condescending tone and accuse me that I did it wrong on purpose or something like that, the conversation is going to be difficult.
Yes. Okay. I love where you're going with this. I think that's so true. So because when somebody is speaking in a condescending tone, and I have absolutely been guilty of it, it's part of what I learned from that 360, that is their defensive reaction. That is their defense mechanism that's activated. One of the things about defensiveness is it's what we don't like in other people. So anytime that you've had a sense of like, I don't really like that person very much, or you just feel that not too excited about collaborating with them right now, what you don't like are their defenses. It's the defensive behaviors that show up for us all the time in our day-to-day interactions that we like to label as, quote, personality. That's what we actually don't like. When you take somebody's defense mechanisms away, I believe everybody at their heart is that humble, open, generous, loving, caring. It's the defense mechanisms that create the distance between us. So without them, I can guarantee you can love anybody.
Well, let's peel back the onion for a moment. So the defense mechanisms, I think back on even when I was a teenager and not liking somebody, that sometimes, correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes it was, hey, they could do something, I wish I could do it that well. There was envy. Sometimes it was, they had something I didn't have, which is similar. Could be good looks, could be whatever it might be. And sometimes it was actually, we were the same in that area.
Mm-hmm.
We both had that flaw.
Mm-hmm.
It was a flaw. We both had the flaw. But it was a lot easier for me to judge them on them having the flaw.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time, I didn't have self-awareness that I needed to focus on myself, which you brought up earlier, the introspection process. But all those responses of my defenses and my judgment are based on fear.
Yeah.
And I had no clue.
Oh, yeah. See, yeah, because the fear was there, but it was suppressed. So it was driving your behavior, but that wasn't consciously what was in your awareness.
I don't know. I'm uncomfortable with that word suppressed. It was not, what's another word for visible? It was not, if I was clueless, I had no idea it was fear-based.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just trying to justify myself.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And also, I didn't have enough self-esteem, which was interesting because at times, and particularly as a teenager, I had vanity. So I didn't have the self-esteem because I was making up for it with vanity in some ways. I didn't have the self-esteem to be open to and understand how to have an open dialogue, active listening skills.
Yes.
How do you ask questions?
Yeah, that was a huge part of my challenge as well. So when you're able to do that kind of introspection, especially in hindsight, when you can look back and, you've matured and you can see there was fear driving me, even though I wasn't aware that's what was driving me. And actually, I just didn't feel good enough about myself in order to see it for what it was. So that's the nature of what defenses are. And when you can see that in yourself, what that means is when somebody else is demonstrating those defensive behaviors, they're probably not fully aware of it, but they're also struggling with their own self-esteem and their own self-acceptance. So when I'm at my best, David, I see that for what it is. I can see when somebody's defensive, that their fear is really activated, that whether they're fully aware of it or not, they're not feeling good about themselves in that moment. And so I'm not good at this every minute of every day, but when I'm at my best, I can see it for what it is. And human nature says that your defenses will likely trigger mine, but I get to choose that. As long as I am aware of my own reactions, I'm aware of my emotions, then I can choose how I feel in response to how you talk to me, how you treat me.
So
And that's a lot of the work that we do, is teach
So talk to
people how to make that choice.
maybe you want to talk about the work that you do, but I'm very interested in if a leader starts to sense the tip of the iceberg that, or anyone, I view everyone as a leader, anyone starts to realize, hey, maybe I don't understand myself as well as I should.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should understand my life experience better. I think I mention it all the time. I was raised by two loving parents, but I'm wounded from my two loving parents.
Mm-hmm.
It's not their fault. They were
They're doing the best they can.
And they did the best they could.
Always.
Why did I not figure that out until I was in my 50s? Because there's no training really out there, although you're doing it. But, what if we taught this in school?
I know.
In 7th and 8th grade and through high school.
Agreed.
Like, to teach all this stuff. I mean, we have much healthier next generation. But so how does a leader do that now? You mentioned introspection. Is that like, oh, the light bulb went on, I got it, I'm good? I don't think so. So what's the process to peel back that onion and actually move from understanding to comprehension to transformation?
Of course. And that's the journey, right? I can't remember if I showed you that last time or not.
There we go.
Because so far for me, it is a journey. And my 4 decades on this planet, it's a journey. I definitely don't feel like I've arrived or figured it all out. But there are a couple key truths, I think, about the science of human behavior, at least as we understand it so far. And one of them was one of the most annoying things I ever learned, David. So every reaction you have is based on how you feel about yourself. And another way to say this that I got from a friend of mine, Gabriella Buich, is what bugs me about you is really about me. And that's what you were highlighting when you were remembering some of the, defensiveness back from high school. Now, some of it is exactly what you're talking about, especially that part of you have this flaw and I do too, and I'd rather focus on your flaws than focus on mine. That's absolutely part of it. That's the critic defense. That's very common. It was my most common defense persona.
And it's pretty subconscious in most people, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
yeah.
People think that I'm just telling it like it is. I'm just a straight shooter. They have all these ways to rationalize their behavior.
Yeah.
But we walk people through an understanding that you're never responding to the world around you. You're actually only ever responding to the meaning you are putting on the situation. So every interaction that you have, your brain is this meaning-making machine, and it's constantly filling in the gaps. And so I'll use your example because I think it's a very relatable one. If somebody approaches you and they're speaking to you in a tone that feels really condescending, your subconscious is immediately making up a story in your head about why they're talking to you like that. And it would sound something like, he must think I'm an idiot if he's going to talk to me like that. He must think that I'm stupid, as an example. If that's the story in your head and it triggers a defensive reaction, or you have kind of that activation around it, then there's at least part of you, and it might be a very small part of you, but there's part of you that's afraid that might be true. Now, for you, maybe the story isn't about competence because, like you said, you're somebody that really just wants to get it right. So if you didn't get it right, then great, give me the information. For you, David, maybe the story in your head is, man, he wouldn't talk to me in that tone if he liked me or cared about me. He must just not care about me, or maybe he thinks I'm unimportant. So you want to work to figure out what is the story in my head? What am I telling myself about how this person must feel about me, that they would treat me this way? That story is what you're actually responding to.
So let's think about it as a blank slate,
Mhm.
or pretty close to a blank slate. So whether you're 20, 30, 50, 60, whatever age, or in between, and you realize, hey, I could understand myself better. I'd like to go on that journey. I may not get the tattoo, but I'd like to go on that journey. And by the way, for those of you listening instead of watching, Laura has a tattoo that says journey,
yeah.
just below her wrist. So what does that look like? I totally agree. It's a journey. I don't know whether we ever get there to full comprehension.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I think
making some strides can significantly improve your life, I would argue.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? Do I need quiet time each morning, doing something maybe that's tied to my faith, whatever that faith may be, and then also doing some introspection of what can I learn about myself today? What do I need to consider? How am I treating people? Maybe reviewing the prior day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, I teach every day. I think we talked about this previously, of some sanctuary time where you're like, okay, I had a little plan yesterday, a win. What's important now? How did I do in the win? But like, also part of that win could be, how did I treat other people? How did I respond or react to what happened during the day?
Yeah.
I mean, you tell me, you're the expert. How do I start to grow?
So we have something that I could share with your listeners if you'd like. It's called a Signs of Defensiveness Survey. And it's a simple one-pager that somebody can take a look at. It's been compiled over years of working with different participants who have been able to check themselves and go, yeah, what does my defensiveness look like? Because as human beings, we get very creative in how our defenses show up. And so I think it's 48 or so defenses, signs of defensiveness, and there's a couple open spots if you're like, hey, none of these quite fit, it's this one instead. But go through this Signs of Defensiveness survey and just elevate your awareness about what your own defenses look like. You go through the whole list first, just any of these that you ever do from defensiveness, and then I'm going to go back and that I tend to demonstrate or exhibit the most. Now, just this process is doing a lot to elevate self-awareness. So
yeah, I would love for you to make that available.
Yeah. So
I'd love to take that. That would be interesting.
It's like from an introspective place. Now, if I can see, now I'm more aware. Maybe I'm in the middle of exhibiting the behavior. Now I'm in a conversation and I'm doing the thing. As an example, one could be whisper deadly silence. Another one is endless explaining and rationalizing. So behaviors can look very, very different, but they might still be signs of defensiveness. When I can be honest with myself about what it looks like for me, now I can see it more clearly for what it is. And so I love some of your suggestions, David. When I can recognize it for what it is, say it's the end of the night or it's the next morning, and I'm like, man, I was just giving them so much detail and information. All they asked for was like, why did I choose to make that button blue? And I just gave them a dissertation on it. Let me think about that for myself. If you can work through that process of what is the story I'm telling myself? They're asking me if why is this button blue? What meaning am I putting on it? What story do I tell myself about why they're questioning my decision? And they'll probably come up with something like, well, I guess I was assuming that they were questioning my competence in my graphic design work, or, so they can do some sort of consciousness writing in their journaling to work to really figure out what is that story I'm telling myself. Now, I'm a fan of structure buckets. So there's a theory that says all humans want to feel significant, competent, and likable. And so if you want to use those, use them. If you don't find them useful, then don't use them. But if you're wanting to figure out every time you're exhibiting one of these signs of defensiveness, what is the story in my head here? Then see if you can put it into the buckets of significance, competence, and likable. Are they speaking in a condescending tone because they think I'm stupid? Or is the story in my head that they're only being condescending because they don't like me? Like, what bucket would I put that in? If I do this, even for a couple weeks, and I'm really honest with myself about when my defenses show up, I'm going to start to see a pattern. And I'm going to figure out, oh, I'm often telling myself a story that my significance is not where I want it to be.
So what were the 3 buckets again?
Significance,
Yeah.
competence, and likability. And this is the fundamental interpersonal relations orientation theory, or FIRO theory, that says all humans want to feel these significant, competent, likable. So if it's useful, you can get that pattern recognition going faster and figure out like what is my own area to practice self-acceptance such that I can decrease my defensiveness.
Well, that sounds really nifty, but I think that most people are stuck with defending what happened.
Yep.
Unfortunately. Yep. So I'm calling you out there. If that's where, and we all are there from time to time, you start by defending. And then if I'm not defending, I'm beating myself up about it.
Yeah.
They just asked me for why I chose blue, and I could have just given a simple answer, and I went on for 5 minutes.
Yeah, what's wrong?
Man, that was so dumb. They must have thought that was so, oh God, It must have been so stupid.
We call that the self-blamer defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let me beat up on myself so much, so if anybody else says anything, it won't hurt so bad because I already beat up on myself. It doesn't actually work. I mean, it works to distract ourselves a little bit, but it doesn't actually move you forward or help you feel better about yourself.
But not at all. Not at all. So then if I could, but it occurs to me that if I could learn this habit of saying, okay, what happened? Mm-hmm. Why did I do that? If I'm hearing you correctly, correct me if I'm wrong.
So
I say, why?
Let me just tweak it. Because there's research on the word why that it's not conducive to this kind of work. Why it can be a very cognitive, intellectual question, and it actually tends to trigger defensiveness even when you pose it to yourself. So I would say ask the question without why, which is, I like the question, what's the story in my head about why they're talking to me this way? Or what's the story in my head about them treating me this way? What am I telling myself that's leading to this reaction? It might feel silly, David, but I've seen, numerous studies that get into why not being the most helpful word for the self-awareness work.
Yeah, I think it's the only reason I'm chuckling is because as a type A, 100% D, why for me is fine as long as I say it in a nice tone of voice to myself. Mm-hmm. So, but I can understand with a lot of people how the other path would be much better. And wouldn't, if I developed that habit of regularly asking myself, there's actually this huge side benefit that then when someone misbehaves, or I perceive it as misbehavior, mm-hmm. I'm going to be more apt to ask, oh, I wonder what their story is.
Yeah.
That's causing them to do that, or why they're doing that. Sorry, I said the Y word, the W word. But yeah, so by working on myself and figuring that out, I actually strengthen my ability to interact and engage in healthier, more positive relationships with other people.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And okay, we're done. We've just solved all their problems.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a process that is extremely powerful. And usually I'm bringing this to people in a much bigger container where they then get to play it out for either, 3 solid days in a workshop with me, or they do the 5-week stress detox workshop that I have, and they can over and over again apply it to their life. Like, how is this stress reaction that I'm having actually a product of my self-judgment? What am I judging myself on? And so there's some repetition, there's some feedback, there's multiple sources of self-awareness people can experience to really kickstart that whole journey of introspection so that they don't feel quite so lost in this really big world of understanding themselves. And if they just do that, like, what's ahead? And you can share it. I can say, like, I notice that I have this story in my head that when you are questioning my design choices that you disagree with them. And I just thought I would share that story to find out what's true for you. And they might be like, oh, well, sometimes I might be disagreeing, but actually, I think most of the time I just want insight into how you're thinking about it. And I'm like, oh, great. That's so useful for me to know, because I kept assuming that you were maybe being critical because you asked the question. So we can start to put more things out there on the table, which helps us feel more connected and not get so stuck in the stories in our heads.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can see where for me. In limited situations, that might make sense. But it seems like first I would try to indirectly confirm in some way by changing my behavior or the way that I'm communicating and see if that changes things.
Mhm.
And if not, then I would move to that step, because some people can be very uncomfortable with that type of, hey, I'm thinking of this and blah, blah, blah. And some victims use that as a defense mechanism, don't they?
Say more about that. What do you mean?
Well, if somebody says, hey, we were in this meeting last week and I brought something up and you initially seemed receptive to it, but then dismissed it, I think, pretty quickly. That kind of made me feel like you don't value my opinion. Is that correct? Or am I misreading that? That's kind of a defensive, isn't it?
The pieces that I hear that sound defensive in what you just sort of role played for us there is, you made me feel. That is one of the most victim things people can ever say. Take no ownership or accountability for your own emotions, which is based on the story in your head. And any you language can also very much come across as the victim. So if I say, well, you did this and you did that and you made me feel this, all of that I would put in the victim bucket.
Interesting.
I can own it and I say, hey, I notice sometimes I just have these stories in my head and they're mine to own and I want to work on it. I don't want to be operating off of assumptions. I had this story in my head that you were dismissing it because you didn't feel like I was competent at my job. Is there part of that that's true, or what was going on for you with that? It's not going to be a silver bullet in that nobody will ever get defensive, but most of the time, especially if they've got a different story in their minds, they're just going to tell you what was really going on for them. There's a vulnerability, I think, to acknowledge, hey, you're hitting on an insecurity of mine. But if I'm owning that insecurity and I'm sharing that with you, I don't know. I don't put that in the victim bucket.
Yeah, I don't know. Of course, it really depends on the situation. Mm-hmm. And we're throwing out a hypothetical one. I mean, more than likely, I would recommend to the person, and just thinking of it off the cuff, is meet one-on-one with the person and just say something a little bit similar. Say, hey, I brought this up in the meeting, and you initially were interested, but then moved on from it. So what type of information could I have brought to you so that you would have more thoroughly considered my idea, my proposal, my whatever? Mm-hmm. And then it kind of removes a lot of the emotional side. I don't know. But I think going back to the main thing you were talking about with Columbia and NASA, the lack of safety.
Yeah.
It also seems like there was a lack of emotional intelligence with people, really understanding strengths and weaknesses. And that the higher ups, there was some fear, which you did not say, but I'm sensing underlying, that we kind of want to lock this thing down and move beyond it, because this is really bad for our reputation, our history, whatever, and tried to minimize it because there was a lack of safety and didn't want to think about it. There was a fear of thinking about it. So I like your idea of keeping a journal, if I heard you correctly, mm-hmm. daily. Do it at least 2 weeks and just track.
Yeah. Take a look at the patterns that show up for you.
Yeah.
And of course, the reason that I am borderline evangelical about self-acceptance as a concept is that self-acceptance is the antidote to all of our defensiveness. Our defenses only show up in the areas that we are judging ourselves. And we do hide a lot of that self-judgment from ourselves, just like I was hiding how much I was afraid of looking or feeling incompetent when I was interacting with my team, and a couple of them saw me as bullying them intellectually. If I had a higher self-acceptance around my competence, if I was more self-accepting of maybe what I'm suggesting isn't the one and only best way to do something, or if I felt more self-accepting on, hey, maybe I've got some leadership skills to develop in terms of how I can cultivate a collaborative discussion rather than try to steamroll people, then I wouldn't have had the same kind of defensive reaction, which just undermines my effectiveness. But I have to let myself know. I have to let myself see the self-judgment in order to really begin practicing that self-acceptance.
So what's your perspective on healthy self-acceptance and unhealthy self-acceptance? Because couldn't you be deceiving yourself in a form of self-acceptance, which could be potentially really toxic?
Self-deception can be possible absolutely anywhere. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Then where's the guardrails, or where's the path where you can also be kind of checking, am I developing healthy self-acceptance versus am I reinforcing some negative things?
The way that I define self-acceptance, it's all healthy. You might be referencing what a lot of people fear, though, which is, am I going to become arrogant or full of myself or a narcissist, things like that? Is that what you mean when you talk about like?
Oh, I think I mean more what you're talking about, the self-deception versus self-acceptance. So you could be thinking you're going down a path of self-acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering as I said, kind of where are the guardrails, where are the boundaries, so you're on that path, versus self-deception. I mean, Hitler thought he was a great guy, and he had it all figured out. Mm-hmm. I'm sure, well, actually, I have no idea. But Jeffrey Epstein, he was a horrible human being. And I wonder what caused him to be that way.
Right.
If we think about that, why? But there was a lot of self-deception going on.
Yep.
When you look at any of these evil people, but even, as you mentioned, happens to all of us at times, in lesser extent. So how do you confirm you're not going down a path where you think you're getting stronger, but you're actually destroying yourself and potentially others?
I'm actually going to go back to something that we talked about in the first episode that I recorded with you too, which is, I think it's the difference between fear and love. So the more you're practicing genuine self-acceptance, the more you actually have a greater feeling of love for everybody around you. The more you stop blaming other people, pointing fingers at them, playing victim to them, murder, any of that stuff. When self-deception is involved, I think it starts to be highly divisive. There's a lot of otherism that shows up, a lot of you versus me, a lot of, good guys, bad guys kind of thinking. And so it's so cheesy. And I will say this sometimes to my leaders, my CEOs, and I'm working with them, but like, love is the answer to almost everything. So when you have that higher degree of self-acceptance, you will feel a greater degree of love and acceptance for the people around you with a sense of compassion, I would imagine too. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't have boundaries. So you talk about somebody like Hitler or somebody like Epstein. This is not to say, oh, just let them do whatever they want because I have love for them and I have compassion for their self-loathing. Boundaries are a critical part of genuine self-acceptance. And it's like you said before, David, I notice I would not want to have a conversation with Epstein, at least not soon. But,
he's not around anymore.
He's not around anymore. But if I was to approach him in conversation, if I'm approaching him through the lens of, judgment, and I approach him with a condescending tone, I'm unlikely to have any kind of breakthrough conversation because he's going to immediately just put me in that other bucket. If I'm able to approach him in a way where I genuinely want to understand him, I'm not saying that it's always going to work, but I'm going to have a better shot at figuring out what is leading him to make the decisions that he's making. And how can I change how he feels about himself or support him in that journey so he stops victimizing other people? So I think that's the ultimate guardrail is this helping me to feel more love or more fear and otherism?
It's interesting because I love, and this is where we should end, really. I mean, because this is the real challenge. And love, characteristics of love. So you have gratitude. And people don't trigger you as much.
Yes.
Because you're like, I know who I am. I know what my purpose is. And so it reminds me of a lot of words that come up with goodness and kindness and gentleness, patience, but there's boundaries. There have to be boundaries.
Absolutely. And
so that's great.
It can create these little breakthroughs, and I can share one more small little story, and then we can wrap it up. But I remember working, one of my jobs in college is that I was a hostess at a restaurant. And I was a pretty good employee. I was very, very conscientious and typically very respectful and positive energy, all that kind of stuff. And there was one morning, and I don't actually remember what was going on for me, but I was not in a very good mood. And my manager came up and he took a look at the seating chart that I had set up for opening. And he said, "Hey, don't we want to make this section like this or over here?" And I had such an attitude. I didn't mean to, but I had such an attitude. And I say, "Well, it doesn't matter anyway, because even if you did this, and this would be the..." Like, I just had such a snotty response. And partly because of his leadership in that moment, and partly because I think it was so uncharacteristic for me, he saw through that. He didn't respond defensively. He just looked at me and he said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I just started bawling. Like, I was not okay. Something else was going on for me. And his ability to stick with me, through that lens of like love and compassion in that moment. I mean, yes, it broke me down emotionally for a moment. I had to compose myself and I apologized after, and I was better. But like, that's how it can serve us. When somebody has that higher degree of self-acceptance, they're practicing the gratitude, they're humble, then it's not just, I'm not going to let this person bother me, but it's, how can I actually show up for this person? How can I support them? Because I can see that this response that they're having is not about me. It's about them.
Yeah, that's right. No, and they're not attacking you. They're just attacking. So great. Well, and why don't you remind the audience, where can they learn more about what you're doing? And then we'll make certain there's a link or something that gets to this one pager that you're going to provide. That would be great. So
yes, I'll be sure to do that. So 2 primary places, selfacceptancequiz.com would be the place that your listeners can go if they also want to take the quiz that you took. I know you were pushing but pressured as your result. So if you want to get a feel for where you are in self-acceptance, self-improvement paradox, that's a great resource, and it'll be connected via email. Or LinkedIn is the other place. I love to post on LinkedIn. So just if you want to connect with me, tell me that you heard me here on David's podcast, and I'll be happy to talk with you or answer any questions you have.
That's great. And to the audience, I want to encourage you, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share it with other people. This is a little bit deeper as far as getting to know yourself than we go a lot of times on this podcast. But I think it's really important. If we're going to be the people that we want to be, we have to spend some time on the potter's wheel and really shape that person into the person that we want to be. It's a journey, as you said. And if you want to get the tattoo, then get the tattoo. That's fine. But if you don't, you still can go on the journey. But thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Laura, for being with me. Love what we covered today. A lot of good stuff for everybody.
Thank you, David.